inverse of exactly what Zuckerberg and what Twitter guy Jack was thinking of happening, only it was happening for the wrong reasons.
Totally. And it's not like every individual instance of how this can be abused would have been foreseeable. But one of the analogies I sometimes use is, starting a social network is like hosting a big house party. And so you set the conditions that set the vibe of the party. So you're not necessarily responsible for the actions of each individual person, but you decide whether you're carting people at the door. You decide whether you have lighted fire exits. You decide if people are allowed to smoke inside. And if you let people smoke inside, someone else has an asthma attack. And, so you're setting the conditions.
What are you liable for?
What are you liable for? Right. Yeah. And then suddenly 2 billion people are at your party and it's like, oh shit, this has gotten out of hand.
And there's a lot of them that are bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Or who are being conditioned to be bad by the atmosphere of the party.
Okay. So let's then go from that point about radicalization now, because it's happening on different tiers. Like, initially in some of the stuff you covered in your book, you had these kids who were angry and proficient at coding and computers and at hacking and everything else. And they got off on each other's ability to troll and make the most disgusting jokes and try to be as immoral as possible. And that kind of spread into this other ideology. And some of them were radicalized by right-wing thinkers. And then it sort of goes from there. But that is the 4chan Twitter model. But, when you're talking about my dad's generation or boomers, sitting there, not on Twitter, on Facebook and in front of Fox News, that are also, being radicalized because it just seems like what's happening to them is different because, and we can talk about this, it seems like the incentive of the kids was to fuck with things. Whereas, people of my parents' generation or boomers that are younger than them think they're seeing something relatively objective because of the format.
Oh, totally. Yeah. There are different levels of intentionality and how much people know what is a game and what is reality. And I think where that you were talking before about how these things coagulate and congeal together, one of the things I kept seeing when I would call these people and say, okay, let me sit in your kitchen and watch you do this, they weren't always the 15-year-old, living down the hall from their parents. Sometimes they were, but other times it would be like, I'm a 39-year-old married guy with kids who, goes for a hike in the morning. And then when I come home, I want to, make sure that Hillary Clinton can't become president. And the easiest way for me to do that is to, make up some kind of, viral rumor about how she has Parkinson's or something. And I'm going to, put together these little scraps of evidence that I saw her blinking once, so therefore I'm going to freeze frame that, say she's having a seizure, make that go viral, then that's going to be recontextualized by the Drudge Report, then the Drudge Report gets picked up by Fox News. So there are people who are kind of in between complete prankster amateurs and professionals. These are people who actually are kind of getting good enough at reverse hacking news cycles that they not only can make money at it, but they can also like inception things into the mainstream of the news cycle to the point where I would be hanging out with somebody watching them do that. I would go the next morning and read the newspaper headlines and I would go, that newspaper headline exists because of what I watched this guy do yesterday.
Wow.
And then it snowballs into this larger grand theory of everything because of all the political energies it's tapping into.
Right, but then you get people like my dad who is sort of like a shallow political moron, regurgitating not even Fox News to me, but the other one. OAN.
OAN, that's the new one. Well, this is the thing that I think a lot of times people underestimate, and I hope that we don't underestimate it again going into 2020, is the degree to which a lot of people don't make decisions based on a well thought out rational analysis of the world. And that's not even like a knock on anyone. It's just a lot of times politics is based on an impression I got of someone. I
don't feel good about that guy.
Yeah, he reminds me of someone I like. And like that's how people vote. I think a majority of people vote. So this way that we go about doing this political analysis and saying, well, his trade policy is like this and her foreign policy is like this. That's all well and good, but like that's a very outdated model of how this stuff works.
Sure, and especially with a generation, what we're finding that ultimately is that most people do it that way.
Yeah.
And generationally speaking, most people are not sophisticated in terms of policy or what it really implies or judicial picks. Mm-hmm. And then you get people like you're talking about. I mean, I guess you were probably talking about Mike Cernovich, before. Yeah. And like, but see, these guys, they've got blood on their hands now for what they've unleashed on the world.
Well,
but
whether they knew what they were doing too. They knew.
But whether they were pranksters or not, they're not political people. They're fucking hucksters.
Yes.
Right?
Well, you can be a political person and a huckster. Like
we have a president. Yeah, I get it.
So there are people who, the more I spent time with these people, Cernovich is one. There are others. They go on a spectrum from nihilist, prankster, I just want to fuck shit up, to committed ideological, Nazi, misogynist, whatever. There's a whole spectrum. But what they have in common is that, like you say, they're not great political thinkers. They're not, a lot of them like to think of themselves as like intellectual or, sort of like amateur philosophers. They're not that. What they are is, and when I would write about them for the New Yorker and then again in the book, I would have to reconceptualize, okay, what are these people? Like, and ultimately what I kept coming back to is they're propagandists, they're media figures. What they're good at is taking memes in the original sense of memes, the Richard Dawkins sense of the word, and propagating those memes into the bloodstream of the national discourse. That they're actually good at. And it wouldn't have been worth my spending that much time with them if they didn't have that very genuine skill set.
Now, but I guess my question and leading into, like, it seems to me that QAnon has absorbed a lot of the momentum that was the infrastructure was put in place by these guys you were talking about. Now, I don't know whether guys like Milo or Cernovich are dormant or they're done. I don't know, but it doesn't matter because now, like, there's this bigger arcing thing, and this mother of all conspiracy theories, which is QAnon, is incorporating, really centuries-old conspiracies.
Protocols of the Elders of Zion kind of stuff.
It's all old-timey, Freemasony, Protocols of Zion. All this shit has been around for fucking ever. Yeah. And now it's sort of been brought together. Now, but when you talk about propagandists in their own right, and maybe they do think that whether it's a mixture of nihilistic fucking with the system or they believe that, on some level they want their guy to win and they believe it ideologically. When you have something like QAnon that absorbs all this stuff, is there a Q? Is there somebody operating this thing on a day-to-day basis that is there an American version of Vladislav Surkov? Do we have, I used to think there was that guy with the beard in Trump's orbit was the guy. But is there, so who's guiding this? Because it seems like a fundamentally more than just a Nazi model. It's a Russian model of setting up theatricality, news events, propaganda. It seems like someone's guiding this. Is there?
Yes and no. So there are people. It's not like there is a Surkov or a Goebbels who we know about. I mean, maybe history will reveal that there were people, Bannon likes to claim that mantle sometimes.
Right.
People talk about Stephen Miller. People talk about, Dan Scavino. But I don't think of it, at least as it's unfolding.
Who's the other guy with the beard? He was head of the campaign,
Parscale, yeah. So I profiled Parscale for the New Yorker. I actually think that with a lot of those people, Parscale being one of them, the fact that they're actually not that unusual or not that, visionary is kind of an interesting part of the point, that you can just be an average dude. Yeah. Like, Parscale is just a guy from Kansas who literally the way he got into the organization was they needed someone to build a cheap website for the Trump real estate business. And he raised his hand from San Antonio and said, I'll do it for $5,000 or whatever. And they were like, we like that price.
Yeah, I remember reading that about that you wrote about him. But I guess I got distracted by the beard and my own projection of insidiousness.
A beard that good can go a long way. But yeah, I think that part of, and why I was, referring to the systems earlier is that if you hitch your wagon to one of those big systems, you don't need to be a bold visionary. You don't need to be a great speechwriter or know how to build an event because the car is already in motion. The car being Facebook or Twitter or Reddit or any of these things, you just kind of have to get in and let it drive.
So, okay. So that there's no, because that becomes a question. I know that Trump's policy or whatever it is, his behavior is being informed by Hannity and some Republican think tanks and a few sort of more policy-minded people that that have charmed him. But in terms of the propaganda that's going on and his sort of kind of is the word tacit support? Is that the word I want? Of it. It doesn't surprise you, but does it?
No, I think nothing is supposed to surprise us anymore. But
right, but like when he sort of gives a little nod to QAnon, like he's just playing to his bleachers.
I mean, I literally think that the way his kind of brand of narcissism works is that literally all he asks is, do these people like me or hate me? Did this person call me a hero or a loser? I think a lot of his worship of Putin, his worship of, name your strongman, is that simple. Like, Putin said a nice thing to me once, therefore I like him. So I think
but they also know he's the fundamental of, real strongmen who are willing to kill on purpose and own it, know that he's a sucker.
Totally. Right. But he doesn't know that they know that. And I think the QAnon stuff, I think that all he needs to know is, are they on my team or are they on the other team? I mean, it's a completely terrifying form of moral bankruptcy, obviously. If you're anything, I mean, we know he's not going to be good at the job, but even to be inhabiting that seat, you should be able to say, this is a scary, murderous cult, and I don't want anything to do with it. And the fact that he's not willing or able to do that, I don't think is unique to this situation. I think it's just, they're on my side. And I think he also gets at some deeper instinctive level that, as you say, it's tied in with a kind of vibe of millennialist Christianity, that it's tied in with a vibe of kind of feels like proto-white nationalist stuff. And that's all stuff that appeals to him too.
Right. But it is like essentially a functioning, self-feeding kind of, unprovable mythology that tends towards, Christian end times prophecy and white nationalism.
Well, and at its core, at the simplest level, it's just literally an extension of all the propositions that I was watching those people setting up in 2015, 2016, 2017, and trying to deal with the cognitive dissonance of none of those predictions being able to come true, right? So just at a very basic level, if you're a gung-ho pro-Trump propagandist going into his campaign, and he's saying things like, I'm going to lock Hillary up, I'm going to make America great again, I'm going to bring all the jobs back, just all the, stuff he's saying, none of that stuff is going to happen, right? So if you follow sort of cognitive dissonance theory, which is, this psychology school going back to the 50s of sort of saying, this is what happened with the original cult of Christianity, that, these people are saying Jesus will come back within your lifetime. You can sell all your stuff, you don't need anything because the world's about to end. The longer that goes without happening, the more people double down and proselytize and say, okay, instead of abandoning this ideology, I'm going to do all these kind of psychological loops to try to make it real. And it's the same thing at play here. The more you believe hucksters' lies and con artistry, the more you either have to jump off the train or you have to stay on the train and work even harder to make those things turn true.
So the ability to suspend your disbelief or to believe, like Christianity in and of itself as a template within the human mind, makes this thing possible.
Yeah. Well, and it doesn't even have to be Christianity, but yes, that as a template, or, there are sects of Islam that do this. There's waiting for the Messiah in Judaism. There's also just, living in an abusive relationship with someone who keeps saying they're going to do something nice for you.
Right. But there's also the fundamental belief, and I sort of am of the school of Becker on this from Denial of Death, that there is almost a genetic compulsion within the human psyche to believe in something bigger than yourself in order to feel like your life is relevant or part of something.
Definitely. There is a need, especially right now, I don't think it's an accident that it's kind of growing during the pandemic and when people's lives are sort of spiraling out of control and when they don't really have any way of finding a sense of purpose, that, and look, this is a basic dynamic that I saw over and over again too, is this notion of the red pill, right? The red pill, as we all know, it's from the Matrix. It's sort of the pill that unlocks the truth. It's the same thing as Alice in Wonderland going down the rabbit hole. It's this ancient, it's Plato and the cave. Yeah, it's this ancient human archetype. But the internet allows you to have this endless series of red pill moments where you go, the scales fall from your eyes and you see the truth. QAnon is like an incredibly labyrinthine, endless cycle of those. So you can always find another puzzle to unlock it.
Okay.
It can be this, yeah.
I get that. I get it. It is the rabbit hole. I understand. Mm-hmm. And it's being fed daily. Mm-hmm. And you can make all sorts of connections throughout the entirety of history. This kind of conspiratorial thinking, reading signs and symbols. How clear does it have to be? Look at this logo. Huh? That kind of shit. Mm-hmm. It's been around a long time. And, and it's very attractive because, it gives people a false sense of intellectualism. It gives them a false sense of history. It gives them closure on things. It serves their ideology. I understand all the reasons why it's appealing to a certain type of mindset, even to somebody like me, but not, I'm not, I know enough about myself to be like, what, take it with a grain of salt. But, I see what's happening now, and fanning flames is one thing, but someone's maintaining this thing.
Well, look, in terms of who it was originally, there are different theories. One theory is it was just a joke, and it's like those 4chan guys you're talking about, where they just all they ever want to do is